Welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Podcast. This podcast reflects on the work, money, and the lives of blue-collar business owners. Blue Collar Wealth expert Darryl Smith discusses the day-to-day obstacles blue-collar business owners face as they pursue a better life, career, and wealth. And now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome again. Today, Darryl Smith and I are going to be talking about the 8-step succession plan for blue-collar business owners. So, Darryl, let's dive right in. Can you give us an overview of these 8 steps? And then we're going to dive a little bit deeper.
Sure, Matt. The 8 steps are kind of straightforward, but we begin with the start with the end in mind. And this is what we want to do is work with the business owner to find out what their ideal outcome they would like to see happen. From there, number 2, we'll go into succession identification, and that's identifying the right people or organizations that the business could be sold to. Number 3 is retirement income planning. Here we're designing retirement structures and choosing the right mix of investment accounts for proper cash flow. Number 4 is planning the exit. This is the type of sale that we're going to do and completing a business evaluation. Number 5 is having a what-if strategy, and this is really planning for the mental incapacity of a business owner. Number 6 is planning your estate, where we're planning the disposition of assets. Number 7, involve others, and this is proper communication is crucial for both family and key employees. Not all employees, but just key employees. And number 8 is the legal stuff. This is the design, completion, signing of all the contracts and agreements and having them organized and safely stored.
Well, Darryl, people always have such good intentions about getting organized and working out all these details and following these steps. However, they're rarely able, for some strange reason, to get this done. So what is the reason that you normally hear?
I do actually see this all the time, and it's really that they don't have the understanding or even the ability. But there are a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of things that they have to work on to get done. And a lot of times it's often a matter of not knowing the right questions to ask and what advisors to ask these questions to.
Well, that does make a lot of sense, man. So do you handle all of this yourself? This is a lot of stuff.
No, not quite. My primary role is really to provide the guidance and the assistance in setting the goals and helping them understand the process. My work also involves preparing clients for when they meet with the other professionals, because we want them to go in prepared and knowing what they're expecting, as opposed to, lawyers and accountants aren't cheap these days, so we want them to be prepared so when they go in, they're ready. And in addition, I can provide necessary financial products, investments, insurance, and group benefits and all that. But that's really just to provide solutions and any planning gaps that they may have.
Well, that's interesting. I see your role then as more of a guide in this whole process, right?
Correct, yeah.
Well, let's dive into these 8 steps that you outlined at the beginning of the podcast, and let's discuss them in more detail. So we're going to start with step number 1. So what do you mean by starting with the end in mind?
This is probably the most important step, Matt, and it's really, if it's not done correctly, it's probably derailed more plans than any other steps. And it's not very often that a business owner will be asked questions such as, what's your goals with the business and your personal life and these types of things. Like, it's more of just getting the quick answers back, because a lot of times when plans are being put in place, what tends to happen is that there can be sometimes delays and the business owner may procrastinate. And that's because the first step wasn't done properly, because you really need the business owner to understand and articulate their goals. And I walked them through a number of discovery exercises that help them have a clearer picture. And it's interesting because once they have the right vision in mind, the rest of the plan goes much easier. And the plan in itself involves identifying what will happen to the business. We put together a team of advisors, lawyers, and accountants, and a few others as well too. And we also have to have a plan in place to deal with the unexpected. Things like accidents or disabilities can really derail things. We need to have the right structures for retirement investment plans, cash flow, how the assets will be dispersed. Again, there's a lot of work that has to be done, but once we get started with the end in mind, then it takes a lot of pressure off the business owner's shoulders, and you can really start to see the plan. And as it comes together, there's actually a great feeling from the business owner knowing that it's being done the way they want it done.
Now for step 2, succession identification. What's involved with this step?
Well, the transition process is not going to happen overnight. And any owner who wants to say remain with the company after the sale, that's sometimes what they want to have happen. I'd like to continue to work for another number of years. That's not always what the new owners want. So it's really about, identifying key members or key employees within the organization that could take over the business for the owner. and take over the owner's duties, I should say, because, from a buyer's perspective, they would gladly pay more for a fully functioning turnkey business as opposed to relying on the old owner because they know how everything gets done. Once the owner's replacement has been identified and the training is underway, the owner's attention can now move towards other tasks and getting the company ready for the sale. So this means ensure everything is in order. It could be me working on outstanding receivables or making necessary repairs to the building or the machinery. You think of it like selling a house. You want to present everything in the best light for the people who are considering buying your house. So it's the same goes with your business. You want to make sure everything is cleaned up properly.
Well, that does make a lot of sense. And when you're talking about the end in mind, it's so interesting that you start with that, because the next couple of steps really have to do with that and projecting yourself into that situation. And step number 3 is retirement income planning. So let's dive into that.
Quite a bit of work needs to be done here, but the bulk of the heavy lifting will be done by the advisors in place, and that's really what our job is. In brief, the accountant will review and recommend whether the proceeds of the sale or other corporate assets should be transferred directly to the retiring business owner or held in a holding company, and that's their job to determine that type of thing. Financial advisor will develop a number of investment strategies and structures to provide tax efficient income during retirement, as well as recommend some possible insurance solutions to eliminate future estate tax or deal with the expensive medical issues and needs for long-term care. We think of our retirement and the good years, but we don't always plan for the bad years, and that's where it's really important that gets done as well too.
And that's a difficult conversation, and I'm glad that you have that, because it really does make a lot of the later life stuff go a lot more smoothly.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Well, number 4 is planning the exit itself. So now the rubber meets the road, man. So let's talk about that.
So what we have to start with is determining the best method for the disposition of the company. A lot of times it can be transferred to key employees or family members. We have to work out the numbers on that. Or it could be sold to a third party. And unfortunately, if the business hasn't been structured properly, it's just going to get sold for the assets of the business, whether it be machinery, equipment, or inventory or whatever. From there, we need to create a fixed timeline of what steps need to be taken. And we have to start with, consider both start and end dates and who's going to be responsible. Without those things in place, then it just gets dragged out and dragged out. And it's just like, in business, when partners want to get together, signing the partnership agreement is the thing that happens very rarely because there's just always the back and forth. There's got to be accountability. That's all. From there, we look at the tax planning and what needs to be done, but also we need to understand really what the business is worth. And that's where we bring in a professional business valuator, and they will go through their process to determine what the fair market value of the business is. Too often a business owner is close to it and thinks, well, it's worth this, but in reality, it's only worth that. So we have to have all that done.
Gotcha. Having a what-if strategy is number 5. I'm interested in this. Talk about that.
A lot of times, we don't think about the negatives, and that's important. We don't want to think about the negatives, but we can be afflicted with mental illness. We can have something happen with an accident, that type of thing. It will stop the planning and everything in its tracks. But we have to have other people in place that can make decisions if the business owner can't make the decisions based on their wishes. And that's why step 1 is so important, because once we've clearly identified what the business owner wants, then we can have someone else step in to help make the decisions, because if it's not done properly, it could be financially devastating. The value of the business could just evaporate, really, and it can be devastating not only to the business owner who's suffering an illness, but also to the family financially.
Well, let's talk about estate planning and planning your estate, number 6.
This is a little bit more in-depth here, but what we're going to talk about is when the lawyer and the accountant and the financial advisor get together. Again, we've got the information from the business owner, what they want to have happen. So we need to make sure that the planning is done so that the assets can actually transfer to family members. And this is in the situation in the event of death.
Okay.
When proper planning can be done so that, if it's done correctly, the assets can transfer within 10 business days to the family.
10 business days? I thought it took months and months, if not years, for the estate process to go through probate and all of that stuff. And the only thing I thought that could be happen that quickly is maybe some stuff with charity. How can that possibly happen within 10 days? Well,
you're correct when assets are directed by the will, and the will is what gets probated. The probate process is to ensure that it's the last will of the business owner, and then there's the whole process that goes through the courts and everything else. But There are ways to transfer assets to family members outside of the will, and therefore avoiding the probate process altogether. So this is where the family members can get the funds that they need when they need it most. And also, going through probate creates a lot of delays, but also incurs a lot of additional costs and fees as well.
Okay, you got to dig deeper into that because you just said that things can be transferred outside of the will. Be more specific.
Okay, well, it works especially well for business owners because it also offers certain things during their lifetime for credit protection and such. But any insurance or life insurance or investments purchased through a life insurance company with a properly named beneficiary actually bypass the will and the probate process altogether. So that's where we can actually have the funds transfer within 10 days. So, and how it works, sorry, just give you a little bit more details.
Well, sure.
Yeah, once the insurance company receives a death claim and a copy of the death certificate, they don't need to go through the will process whatsoever because, like I said, insurance laws are actually a lot older. Insurance has been around for, in some situations, up to 200 years. So the laws are very straightforward. It's an insurance product. There's a beneficiary. The payout, the death has been, the death claim has been approved, and here are the checks. So it's important that things get done properly as well. There's a little bit more planning that has to get involved into it, but it can be done quite quickly.
Well, we're gonna keep unpacking this. So, I mean, I knew about life insurance, and I think people are comfortable with the philosophy or the understanding of what insurance does. But I didn't know you could do that stuff with investments. Is there anything else with naming more than just a beneficiary?
No, not really. The only thing that can kind of mess up the planning, we have to ensure that there are no declarations within the will mentioning the insurance or the investments. We actually do that within the contracts of the investments and the insurance. They have the named beneficiary there. So if someone declares that in the will, then that will override what we've done in the contract. So we have to be clear in all the planning, and that's where all the advisors kind of come together to help out.
Okay. Well, keep going because there's so much involved with step number 6 here. I want you to keep explaining to our audience how all of this works.
Well, you can actually take the planning one step further, and you can actually direct how the beneficiaries will receive the money. And what I mean by that is when you're completing the applications, you can actually set it up so your beneficiary can receive a lump sum, income for a fixed number of years, or their entire lifetime, or a combination. It's really your choice. And the idea here is that you can ensure that the gift they receive will give them give them a lump sum to help pay down their debt, but they can still receive a monthly income for years to come.
What happens if something happens with a divorce? How does that affect all of this?
Well, what's interesting is that when money is inherited, for example, it does not form a part of the marital assets. Let's say you have an income stream coming in, you use an income from that and you pay down the mortgage. Well, that money is what's called commingled now, and that will form part of the marital assets. But the inheritance in itself is protected because what we do is we put it into a lifetime annuity, for example. And if there is a divorce, what ends up happening is that the money will stay with we're talking about the business owner's children a lot of the times too, adult children. So it's a way of actually directing it so that they will receive upfront lump sums, but also income for life. And it's protected from creditor claims, lawsuit, and divorce. And that's something that's kind of unusual that's out there. In our day and age, unfortunately, divorce is a 50% chance, I think it is now. So we want to protect what the business owner has built up and keep it within the bloodline, and that's how we can do it.
Gotcha. All right. Step number 7 is involving others.
Again, really important. You can't work in a vacuum when you're doing this. You probably run the business for 10, 20, or 30 years, and even if your spouse or your kids are not involved in the day-to-day operation, they've helped build the business by supporting you, and they've helped build the business by being a sounding board for you because you trust them. So this is the thing you're gonna talk to them about. And key employees are important as well too because you need to communicate all the ideas and things that you're going on. Because if there's you don't want to create a rift in the family, and you don't want to have in a situation where a key employee is not being involved, and all of a sudden they find out and then they leave the company. And it's important that as you go through the process, that you're making an effort to just get a notebook and document conversations and meetings, like who was there, what we talked about, what was happening, date, time, names, all those kinds of things are important because something comes up down the road. The book helps keep everything on track.
Okay. Well, we've been talking about the 8-step succession plan for blue-collar business owners. So we're about to go to number 8, but I'm going to go back here. Number 1 was start with the end in mind. Number 2, succession identification. Number 3, retirement income planning. Number 4, planning the exit. Number 5, having a what-if strategy planning, or number 6 was planning your estate. Number 7 was what he just talked about there, which is involving others. And number 8 is the legal stuff. And I like that you call it the legal stuff because there's a lot of legal stuff, man.
There is both on the personal and the individual side, and it has to get done. It has to get done properly. You can't do it twice. We're looking at the succession of your life's work in your business, your retirement, health and welfare, and finally your estate. So I'm going to go through a quick list of the documents that have to be taken into consideration and done properly, and we'll start with personal and corporate wills. Now, corporate will is something very few people consider or even know about, and should always be part of the planning process because, the business in itself could, in situations, be worth millions of dollars. So it has to have clear direction. That's where a corporate will come in. Powers of attorney, there are 2 types. One is for property and one is for personal. So the property power of attorney gives someone the ability to manage your financial affairs. And the personal allows someone to make health decisions on your behalf. Certain people do not want to be resuscitated, or they don't want blood transfusions. That's where these documents kind of come into place. When you can't make decisions for yourself due to mental incapacity brought on by an accident or illness, this is why we have these in place, and they have to get done properly. Tax records, personal tax records. We've got, personal property deeds, investments, mortgages, insurance. And insurance is not just life insurance. It can be disability, it can be critical illness and long-term care coverage. Then we get into the corporate side of things. We're looking at the financial statements, tax returns, shareholders agreements, minute book, property deeds, insurance documents, commercial and liability protection, employee and health and dental plans, group pensions, group RSPs, and a complete list of contacts of professional advisors. So that's what this whole kind of planning process involves, and there's a lot to it. So again, we have to start, as I said earlier, with what does the business owner really want, and then hopefully what we've been able to do is give people an overview of all the things that are involved. It's not going to happen quickly, and that's where the planning needs to get started as soon as it can.
Well, Darryl, I really do believe that you've given us a better understanding of what needs to be done for a successful, exit strategy. This is a really big deal, everybody. If you're not preparing for this, then it's really not going to go as well as you want, and you need to do that 10-year horizon that Darryl has talked about in the past. So thank you, Darryl, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Matt, and take care.
To learn more about Darryl Smith and the Blue Wealth Business Succession Program, please visit us at synergylife.ca. For more information, go to the website and download a free yet informative workbook, The 10 Tips to Maximize Blue-Collar Wealth. You can also book a 20-minute no-obligation meeting with Darryl to ask any questions you may have. We hope you've enjoyed today's show, and please remember that the topics covered here today are for informational purposes only. Please discuss these ideas with your professional advisors before making any changes to your situation.